To co-op or not to co-op? That is the question. If you have been wondering about co-ops, what are they? Should you join one? And you want to hear about my experience with co-ops. Of course, I don't know everything about co-ops. I only know what I have experienced. Then stick around. So there are a lot of people that say never join a co-op, they tried it, that they'll never do it again. And there have been a lot of negative things said about co-ops, but there's also a lot of positive things to say about co-ops. And I really have a lot of positive to say about them, but let me share my experiences with you. Let me first, for those of you who don't know what I mean by a homeschool co-op, let me just explain what that is. So generally speaking, a homeschool co-op is a group of families that get together and they cooperate together to lead their children in homeschooling activities, whether it be for social or educational or extracurricular activities. That is a homeschool co-op. The parents generally all participate, whether paid or unpaid. Everybody may just help out of their own pocket, or there might be a fee to join. But generally speaking, the parents are all involved in a way, whether it is by financial or by actually teaching. There's many different types. During COVID, there's something that came out people called, here at least in Ontario, homeschool pods. And that was someone deciding that they would essentially start more like traditional schools. They weren't officially teachers, they are homeschool teachers, but they would have students enroll into their classes that they offered. And it was more like a business model where they're offering a service to homeschooling families, and that's not a co-op. A co-op is where all the parents participate together and often sharing their skills in one way or another, and are supporting each other to have a successful program for their students. So 3 years ago, I decided to start my own co-op. I looked around in my community and there weren't any co-ops in our area. I looked, quite a large area. There's a lot of homeschooling families, but no one was really running anything with an educational purpose where students could learn specific subjects together as a group. And I first posted in Facebook, asking, if people would be interested in starting a co-op and what types of subjects would they want to learn and what age groups were the children out there, and looking for those kinds of things. Of course, we also had to keep in mind that we needed a place to do it. Doing it in my home wouldn't have been possible at that time because my husband is a shift worker and is often sleeping, and so we aren't able, does night shifts, and so we aren't able to, host a co-op on a regular basis in our home. So 3 years ago, there was another mom who was really interested in starting a co-op, but she was too busy running her own business. And so she wanted her daughter to join one. And her way of supporting was to offer her home. She runs a business from her home, and she had several rooms that would have been perfect for a small class size. And I asked all of the parents who wanted to participate which subjects they were interested in. And so we took the majority vote, which would have been history. So I started a history co-op 3 years ago. We followed Story of the World, and essentially the students would just have to read the chapters at home, and then we would do all the extra activities and learning activities and crafts and things that were part of the Story of the World curriculum in their extra activities book. We would go through the map work and lots of things like that, and fun activities. And the capacity of that co-op was about 12 students, was how much room we had to sit around our tabled area. And so we had a range of 12 students from ages 5 to, at that time, I believe, age 9. It was a success. In that co-op, it did run more like a pod because I was the only teacher and the moms brought the students. And so my kids had an excellent way of interacting, seeing children on a regular basis, making friendships, We would do about an hour inside of class, and they would get to play outside for another hour to an hour and a half together. And this was on a farm, so there was a lot of animals they could interact with. They often played tag or capture the flag and things like that. And it was an amazing experience. I did feel a little bit burnt out being the only teacher, but I also really loved teaching and I enjoyed lesson planning, so it was something that I wanted to continue doing. We did it again the following year, and instead of history, we decided to do science, which turned out to be more like nature study. And then I had a friend that wanted to join us, but she also then asked if she could offer her own services and teach something as well. So she began teaching Shakespeare. And that was an excellent year as well. And it was great to have another mom to kind of bounce ideas back and forth of, and even the accountability of having another mom to work alongside. So I would do nature study she would do Shakespeare for about a half an hour, and I would do nature study for about a half an hour, and then the kids would play outside for another hour or two, all the same activities. And a lot of the kids were the same. There were a few families that changed. We had a lot of families that wanted to join us, but again, the capacity was about 12 kids. And that year we ended up squeezing it to 13, and it was very tight, but great. And we built some really amazing friendships through that experience. Well, the mom that joined me was ready to kind of expand and do more. And we had other friends who really wanted to join us, but we didn't have the space. They couldn't join us because of the capacity size. So we decided to start a second co-op. So our other co-op was meeting on Mondays, and this other co-op was going to meet on Fridays. The other mom who really wanted to join us had 6 children, and she had found a space, a beautiful farm that wasn't being used for anything. They were planning on turning it into a sort of, I believe, an event space, but they were waiting for all of the situations to kind of pan out. And so in the meantime, we were able to use this farm space. And so because we had such a big space, we were opening it up to more people. And so here's where our experience sort of unraveled a little bit. We realized through this experience that you really want to pick and choose the right families to join you. There were some families that weren't quite a good fit. And at first, some of the relationships weren't jiving as much. There were some groups of kids were starting to separate, rather than play all together in one big group, the way that they were on our Monday groups. The kids were kind of branching off into separate little factions and doing their own things. And then some children, I felt, were a bit left out and didn't know which one they belonged in. They were kind of in that middle age range where they couldn't go with the older kids, but they weren't quite the little kid, and that kind of thing. Or there'd be more, heavy on the boy side and light on the girl side, things like that. And we did work through those. We really grew wonderful, amazing, best friendships out of this co-op, but we did work through which families and how many, and we weren't going to just open our doors to as many children as, that wanted to join. We were kind of saying, like, this is our co-op. We're not planning on expanding it. This is as far as we go, even though we had a lot of interest to join us. It just turned out to not really be a good mix, to just add more and more and more. And then my youngest daughter, she was one of those children that ended up being a bit left out because there just weren't any girls her age in the littles section. The littles were all boys, and she got along wonderfully with the boys, but she often asked, she really wanted to meet some girlfriends. So we did try to go out and join another co-op that was long distance for us, and this was a third co-op. We ended up taking a pause on our Monday co-ops for a little while, and we were starting to do this co-op instead because I wanted to just fix. My older daughter had a huge circle of best friends, but my younger daughter didn't have that yet, and so I wanted to find something for her. But it was hard to break into another group of friendships where they lived in a really completely different community. They did all of their own things. They were also because we were always with older, they were a younger generation in a way. They had children my younger daughter's age, so they were doing a lot of younger children things, but my daughter is used to tagging along with older kids and doing kind of big kid stuff. So that the chemistry wasn't really working in the right way. We went for about 6 months, I believe, and we were enjoying it. One thing that I would say that wasn't as enjoyable is the after play time. So having class time and then having an after play time was when those friendships really built among the mothers and among the kids. And it wasn't a time where we really had a big after kind of play activities time. It was just, we would show up at a library and we would do certain activities together, and there'd be a short park time after, but then nap time would hit because there were more littles in this group, and we would then just go home. And so those relationships weren't given time to grow. I'm sure they would have given time, but they just didn't. And the distance in the winter time, it was about a 50-minute drive for us, so nearly an hour's drive for us to get to this co-op. And it just, with the busyness of our schedule, because we were involved in several other extracurricular activities, we literally had some weeks 4 out of 5 days where we had to go out of the home for activities. And of course, it just was becoming too much. But what I learned from all of my experiences are small groups for us is best. In smaller groups, all the kids play together. From the youngest to the oldest, they all do group things and no one gets left out. The bigger the group gets, the more little groups break off, and there's more of that interaction like you would see in a traditional school or public school, where kids are leaving out others and they're segregating by age or by gender, and rather than just playing all together, the way a lot of homeschool kids do. So smaller groups is best. When all the moms cooperate, so our Friday co-op, me, the mom that joined me the first time, and then the third mom with the 6 kids, the 3 of us teach. And it is amazing. I can rely on them. When I have been sick, they've stepped up and taught my subject, and vice versa. And we rely on each other, and we can count on one another, and we know the love and the care that they put into everything that they do, and we're confident that our children are in good hands when they're teaching our kids and we're off teaching another group, and we rotate through the 3 subjects and then have a playtime. So having other moms cooperate really prevents burnout. I wouldn't necessarily want to just join. I know sometimes you may not feel that you're gifted or talented in being able to teach. You may feel shy and not want to teach other parents' children, just your own. But it really helps to lighten the burden of doing it all on your own. And when you go into a co-op and you say, here's my kids, I'll pay, for you to do it, that burden of having all of that planning and teaching and responsibility still can burn out that parent. So it isn't as great when you go into a co-op where not everyone is cooperating. And there's other forms of cooperating. For example, another mom that has joined our Friday co-op, she plans all of our field trips. She really is great at planning. She loves the organizing, the calling around, the searching for those kinds of things. I'm not really big on that kind of stuff, and she's great at that, and she plans all of our extracurricular activities. She also helps out when we do events and planning those kinds of things. We'll do parties, we'll do Halloween parties and Christmas parties and end of the year parties and different things like that. So she's part of that, helps part of that planning. Another mom, she always helps with the setup and the cleanup and all that kind of stuff. Like we need the chairs and tables moved around, and she's in there helping and participating in that way. And so at least it's not a drop-off situation where all the parents are willing to pitch in and help, whether it's to bring snacks, whatever it is, it really adds to it. But we have absolutely loved our co-ops. We have built wonderful friendships. Our kids get to learn how to engage in different kinds of situations. When they're always only knowing how things work in your home, but but you don't learn how to interact with different kinds of personalities, different ways of thinking, then suddenly when you move out into that world, we do want to shelter our children, but they do need to learn a little bit of reality, how to socialize, how to interact, what's the norm, what's not the norm at an early age. It really helps. When homeschoolers get that reputation of being socially awkward or weird, that is where we get that from, when we're not exposing our children to learn how to interact with different kinds of people, to learn how to give and take, to learn how to stand up for yourself, to know when to give in, to learn how to share. Those are all things that they learn how to do through co-ops. That is my experience. Please comment below and share your experiences about co-op. I'd love to hear more because I've only seen from my perspective, but I do hear a lot of negative stories. And if you have positive ones, please share those as well. And if you have any questions for me regarding anything about homeschool, please feel free to comment below because I love answering your questions. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.